When that billionaire threw red wine in my daddy's face at my own wedding, the whole room went silent. But before I could even move, my stepmother, the woman I'd resented for years, stood up with a smile that made his blood run cold. What happened next changed everything I thought I knew. Hey everyone, my name is Brianna, and I need to tell you about the day that was supposed to be the happiest of my life, but turned into something I never could have imagined. If you've ever underestimated someone based on their quiet nature, stay with me. This story will remind you why you should never judge a book by its cover. Make sure you're subscribed because you won't want to miss how this unfolds. Trust me, you're going to want to hear every word of this. So let me take you back to the beginning, because to understand what happened at my wedding, you need to understand my daddy. Gerald is his name, and that man is my whole heart. After my mama passed when I was 10 years old, it was just me and him against the world. He worked as a mechanic, and I'm not talking about some fancy dealership. No, he had a small garage on the south side where he fixed up cars for people in the neighborhood who couldn't afford those expensive repair shops. He'd come home every night with grease under his fingernails and exhaustion in his eyes, but he never once complained. That man worked 3 jobs at one point to make sure I could go to college. He'd be at the garage during the day, doing security at night, and picking up weekend shifts at a warehouse. I remember being 16 and begging him to let me get a job to help out, and he looked at me with those tired eyes and said, "Baby girl, your job is to study. My job is to make sure you have a better life than I did." And he meant every word. He never missed a parent-teacher conference, never missed a dance recital, never missed a graduation. When I walked across that stage and got my degree in marketing, I saw tears running down his face, and I promised myself I'd make him proud every single day. Now, I've done pretty well for myself. I work at a good marketing firm in the city, got my own apartment, and I thought I was giving my daddy the life he deserved by being successful. But 3 years ago, something happened that I wasn't ready for. Daddy met Lorraine. He met her at a community center where he'd started volunteering on weekends, helping teach kids basic car maintenance. Lorraine worked there part-time, and she also had a job at the local library. From the moment Daddy introduced us, I knew he was smitten. But me? I had walls up so high you'd need a ladder to climb them. See, in my mind, nobody could ever replace my mama. Nobody had the right to even try. And Lorraine, with her soft voice and gentle ways, seemed so ordinary. She was quiet, always staying in the background, never trying to push herself into my life. She'd smile at me, ask me simple questions about work, and never overstepped. But I kept her at arm's length. We were polite, civil even, but I never let her in. I attended dinners with them, said the right things, but my heart stayed closed. Looking back now, I realize I judged her. I judged her for being simple, for being quiet, for not being remarkable in the ways I thought mattered. But I'm getting ahead of myself. 2 years ago, I met DeAndre at a networking event. He's a software engineer, smart as they come, with the kindest heart you've ever seen. We fell in love fast, and when he proposed last year, I felt like my life was finally complete. DeAndre came from a good family. His parents were both teachers, and they raised him with solid values. We started planning the wedding, and Daddy insisted on contributing even though I told him I could handle it. That stubborn man dipped into his savings because he said a father should help with his daughter's wedding. It made me cry, but I let him have that pride. Now, DeAndre had this best friend from college named Trevor Hamilton. I'd met Trevor a few times, and something about him always rubbed me the wrong way. He was successful, I'll give him that. The man built a tech company in his 20s and became a billionaire before he turned 30. He came from old money too, so he had that generational wealth behind him. But Trevor had this way of talking to people, especially people he thought were beneath him, that made my skin crawl. He'd make little comments, subtle digs wrapped in jokes that weren't really jokes. DeAndre would always say, "That's just Trevor being Trevor." And I'd let it slide because I didn't want to cause problems. The warning signs were there. I just didn't pay attention. So we planned this beautiful wedding. We chose this gorgeous venue with tall windows and crystal chandeliers, invited 150 of our closest family and friends, and I found the perfect dress. The morning of the wedding, I felt like I was floating. Daddy looked so handsome in his tuxedo, standing tall and proud. He kept tearing up every time he looked at me, telling me how beautiful I was and how proud Mama would have been. Lorraine was there too, of course, looking elegant in a simple navy dress. She stayed in the background like always, making sure everything was running smoothly, checking on the flowers, making sure Daddy had water because he was so nervous. I noticed it, but I didn't really appreciate it. Not then. The ceremony was perfect. I married the love of my life, and when we walked back down that aisle as husband and wife, I thought nothing could touch the joy I felt. Then we moved to the reception, and that's when everything changed. Trevor showed up with his usual entourage, all flash and expensive suits. He had that energy like he owned every room he walked into, and honestly, most of the time people let him. The reception was beautiful. We had a live band, amazing food, and everyone was having a good time. Then came the speeches. DeAndre's father spoke, my matron of honor spoke, and then it was Daddy's turn. I'll never forget watching him stand up, hands shaking slightly as he held that microphone. He talked about raising me, about the nights he worried he wasn't doing enough, about watching me grow into a woman he was proud of. He talked about working with his hands his whole life, about the dignity in honest work, about how he always taught me that your worth isn't measured by your bank account, but by your character. The room was silent, and I saw people wiping their eyes. It was beautiful and real and everything my daddy is. Then Trevor laughed. Not a polite chuckle, but a loud, dismissive laugh that cut through the emotion like a knife. People turned to look at him, and he had this smirk on his face. He was drunk, I could see that now, his eyes glassy and his movements loose. He said something under his breath to the people at his table, and they looked uncomfortable. Daddy handled it with grace, like he always does. He finished his speech and sat down, but I could see the hurt in his eyes. DeAndre squeezed my hand under the table, and I saw his jaw tighten. The reception continued, but there was this tension in the air now. Then dinner was served, and Trevor got louder. He started making comments about blue-collar work, about people who work with their hands like it was something to be ashamed of. My blood was boiling, but Daddy, bless his heart, tried to educate the man. He turned to Trevor and said, in that calm voice of his, "Son, there's dignity in all honest work. The world needs mechanics just as much as it needs tech companies. Maybe even more, because when your fancy car breaks down, you're going to need someone like me to fix it." It was polite. It was true. It was Daddy trying to bridge a gap, but Trevor didn't want a bridge. Trevor stood up, swaying slightly, his face red with anger and alcohol. The whole room went quiet. I mean, you could hear a pin drop. And then he said words I'll never forget. "People like you need to know their place." Before anyone could react, before anyone could process what was happening, Trevor grabbed his wine glass, full of deep red wine, and threw it directly in my daddy's face. The wine splashed across Daddy's face, dripped down his tuxedo, stained the white tablecloth. Time seemed to stop. My daddy just sat there, wine dripping from his chin, shock and humiliation written across his face. I jumped up, my chair falling backward. DeAndre started moving toward Trevor, but someone else moved first. Lorraine stood up, slowly, calmly, like she had all the time in the world. She picked up her napkin, walked over to Daddy, and gently wiped his face. Her movements were so tender, so full of love, that it made my heart ache. Then she turned to Trevor. The entire room was watching now, 150 people holding their breath. Lorraine walked toward Trevor with this smile on her face, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was the kind of smile that made something cold run down my spine. She stopped right in front of him and said, in a voice that was soft, but somehow carried to every corner of that room, "Mr. Hamilton, I don't believe we've been properly introduced." Then she reached into her small evening purse and pulled out a business card. She handed it to Trevor with that same chilling smile. Trevor took the card, squinting at it with his drunk eyes. I watched as the color drained from his face. He looked from the card to Lorraine, then back to the card like he couldn't believe what he was reading. People around us started whispering, pulling out their phones, and then Lorraine spoke again. My name is Lorraine Josephine Hayes. Perhaps you've heard of me. I served as a chief federal judge for 12 years before I retired. Currently, I sit on the board of directors for 3 Fortune 500 companies. One of them, coincidentally, is the primary investor in your company, Trevor. Small world, isn't it? The whispers got louder. I stood there, frozen, my mind trying to process what I was hearing. Lorraine? My stepmother, Lorraine? The quiet librarian who volunteered at community centers? But Lorraine wasn't done. She continued in that same soft, deadly calm voice. I've been following your company with great interest, Mr. Hamilton, particularly the recent SEC investigation into some of your business practices, and those patent disputes that seem to keep piling up. Fascinating reading, really. I have all the documentation, of course. It's my job to stay informed about companies we invest in. Trevor tried to speak, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Lorraine held up one graceful hand, silencing him. The contracts your company has with our investment firm include what we call character clauses, Mr. Hamilton. They allow us to review partnerships when someone's personal conduct calls their professional judgment into question. And what you just did, throwing wine in the face of a hard-working, honest man simply because you think your money makes you better than him, well, that tells me everything I need to know about your character. I had never heard Lorraine speak like this. She never raised her voice, not once, but every word landed like a judge's gavel, final and absolute. Trevor was white now, all the drunken bravado gone, replaced by pure fear. He started stammering apologies, reaching out toward Lorraine, but she stepped back. The disrespect you showed my husband, she said, and the way she emphasized my husband with such fierce love made tears spring to my eyes. A man, who is worth 10 of you, tells me exactly what kind of person you are, and I promise you, Mr. Hamilton, by tomorrow morning, the board will be having a very serious conversation about our continued investment in your company. Just then, the doors to the reception hall burst open, and Trevor's parents rushed in. They must have gotten calls from people at the wedding because they looked panicked. His mother, a distinguished woman I'd met once before, took one look at the scene. Her son standing there in disgrace, wine stains on the floor, my daddy's ruined tuxedo. And she knew. They apologized profusely to us, to Daddy, to the whole room. They literally dragged Trevor out of there, and I could hear him trying to explain, to beg forgiveness, all the way out the door. The room erupted in whispers and gasps. People were looking at Lorraine with new eyes, pulling up information on their phones. I stood there, my wedding day in shambles, my mind reeling. DeAndre had his arm around me, but I couldn't feel it. All I could see was Lorraine, helping Daddy out of his ruined jacket, speaking softly to him, her hand on his cheek with such tenderness. The band started playing again, trying to salvage the evening, but I couldn't move. I walked over to Lorraine, and when she looked up at me, I saw something in her eyes I'd never allowed myself to see before. Strength, depth, love, not just for Daddy, but for me too. "Why didn't you tell us?" I whispered. "Why didn't you tell me who you really were?" Lorraine smiled. A real smile this time, sad but understanding. "Baby girl," she said, and it was the first time she'd ever called me that, the name my mama used to call me. After my first husband passed, he was a senator, and I spent 20 years in that world. Everyone wanted something from me. My name, my connections, my influence. When I met your father at that community center, he didn't know anything about my past. He loved me for who I was in that moment. A woman who liked books and helping kids and eating Sunday dinners. He loved me, not Judge Hayes, not the woman on corporate boards, just Lorraine. Do you know how rare that is? How precious? I felt something break open in my chest. "I judged you," I said, tears streaming down my face now. "I thought you were just ordinary. I thought you weren't special enough for him or for our family. But I was wrong. I was so wrong." Lorraine took my hands in hers. "You know what's funny? You judged me for being ordinary, for not being impressive enough. Trevor judged your father for being a mechanic, for working with his hands. We're not so different, people. We all make assumptions about who matters and who doesn't based on the wrong things. And that hit me like a truck. She was right. I had looked down on her the same way Trevor looked down on my daddy. I had decided she wasn't worthy based on her quiet life and simple job, never bothering to look deeper, never bothering to see who she really was. Daddy came over then, in a borrowed jacket someone had given him, and he put his arm around Lorraine. "This woman," he said, looking at her with such love it made my heart hurt, "is the most remarkable person I've ever met. Not because of her titles or her money or her connections, because of her heart, because she's kind, because she sees people, really sees them. And she chose me, a simple mechanic with grease under his nails, and she loves me exactly as I am." I hugged them both, crying into their shoulders, apologizing for being so cold, for keeping Lorraine at a distance all these years. And you know what she said? "You weren't ready. Grief has its own timeline, but we're here now, and that's what matters." The rest of the wedding was actually beautiful. Once Trevor was gone, the tension lifted. People came up to Daddy and Lorraine all night, some apologizing for not recognizing Judge Hayes, others just wanting to shake Daddy's hand and tell him how much they respected him. DeAndre's parents were mortified about Trevor, but we told them it wasn't their fault. You can't control other people's choices. By the time DeAndre and I left for our honeymoon, I felt different. Lighter somehow, like I'd been carrying something heavy for years, and finally put it down. Now, you want to know what happened to Trevor? By the next week, the story had spread everywhere. His company's investors called an emergency board meeting. Turns out, Lorraine wasn't exaggerating about those SEC investigations and patent disputes. With the spotlight on him, with his character called into question publicly, everything fell apart. He was removed as CEO of his own company within a month. His reputation in the business world was destroyed, not because of Lorraine directly, though I'm sure her phone calls didn't help him, but because when you show people who you really are, entitled, disrespectful, cruel, eventually it catches up with you. As for Lorraine and me, everything changed. We talk almost every day now. She's taught me so much about real strength, about the power of quiet dignity, about loving people for who they are rather than what they can do for you. Last month, she and Daddy came over for dinner, and she told me stories about her years as a judge, about the cases she presided over, about the fights she fought for justice. And you know what? She told those stories the same way she talked about her favorite books at the library, with passion, with care, but without any need to impress. That's who she is. I think about that day a lot. My wedding day that turned into something completely unexpected, and I realize now that it was a gift in a strange way. It showed me the truth about people. Trevor, with all his money and success, was small inside, petty and mean and insecure. My daddy, who never made more than $50,000 a year in his life, was rich in all the ways that mattered, and Lorraine, who I had dismissed as ordinary, was extraordinary in ways I'd been too blind to see. The biggest lesson I learned is this: never judge someone by their job title, their bank account, or how much noise they make in a room. The quietest person might be the most powerful. The simplest life might hide the greatest wisdom. And respect, real respect, costs nothing but means everything. So that's my story. The day a billionaire tried to humiliate my father at my wedding, and my stepmother reminded everyone in that room what real class looks like. Don't let this story end here. Hit that like button if you believe respect costs nothing but means everything. Subscribe and turn on notifications because I share real stories about real people who remind us what truly matters. Drop a comment telling me about a time someone surprised you by being more than they seemed. I read every single one, and I want to hear your stories. Have you ever underestimated someone only to discover how wrong you were? Or have you been underestimated yourself? Share it with me. And remember, the next time you meet someone, look deeper. See people for who they really are, not what they appear to be on the surface. See you in the next story, and thank you for listening to mine.